Okay, in our next session, thank you very much, we're going to look at the maturity of Open RAN. Since we've kind of heard about the use cases and sort of the challenges, let's see where the solutions are at. And first off, we have Jan Berglund from Comba Telecom to take us through. Welcome, Jan.
All right, thank you. All right, very good. Thank you. So, all right, so I'm Jan Berglund from Comba Telecom. If you don't know Comba, Comba is an RF house. We've been around for 25 years, probably mostly known for antennas, DAS systems, but we've done a lot of high-power radios over the years, and this is our sort of legacy in the background of why we were so interested in getting into this Open RAN. What I will take you through is trying to explain where we believe the market is right now and how mature these systems are, and also maybe what is sort of the gap that's still out there. See if I can get this working. Right. Once upon a time, we used to be quite a lot of people in this industry. However, it's all been sort of consolidated down to very few left out there. And that's really an anomaly. It shouldn't be this few left. Now, we all know the rule of three. Yes, it will sort of collapse down to that one. But given where we are and some of the regulations or restrictions around this at this point in time, it's sort of beyond where we expect it to be. And this is where Open RAN comes in and has its sort of heyday. Now, this should restore the balance. And it's a very interesting prospect from looking at it as an ecosystem. What I'll do today, I'll take you through some of the solutions, both from a sort of an ecosystem perspective, the component side of it, but also the business side of it, because all of it is sort of tied together in a maturity complex. If you look at the ecosystem, there's absolutely no dearth of suppliers that think that they are capable of doing this. The good thing here is that we see there's a plenitude of entrants into this market. We also see that if you look at these names here, many of them are not new. This is very different if you look at some of the other sort of emerging markets you would find in different technologies. These are companies that had some legacy to a large extent in this business before sort of this Open RAN really opened up, and then been able to leverage the knowledge that they do have in this space and do investment. Which also means that the investment that is coming into this is partly, yes, it's venture capital funded, but partly is also driven out of the real revenues from other products that are driving this one forward. The question is, of course, all right, do we have a solution? And is this really healthy to be this many? At this point of time, it's probably healthy because we do need a lot of different solutions to address the different problems that's out there. Will it collapse at some point of time? I wouldn't say collapse, but we for sure see some type of convergence and some type of consolidation in this industry. But we're not there yet. At this point of time, we need to embrace this, and we need to do the best out of this situation to provide these solutions. In the industry, we often talk about sort of feature parity when we look at solutions and the maturity of a system. I'm very skeptical myself to talk about this feature parity. To me, that means that all these features that the legacy vendors have had out there, and there might be thousands of them, that we all know that maybe an operator uses 100, 200 out of each kit. More interesting is to look at the sort of three most important things if you want to replace a existing service out there. One is about equivalent end user services. So that is being able to deliver the same things as today's network from an end user perspective. I heard Francisco talk a lot about that in the last session, so I do think that that is maybe the most important thing. Yet, we also have these two other things that are sort of driving it forward. One is the equivalent coverage. So there's no point of delivering a solution if it doesn't do the same coverage as the previous solutions. And we also have the quality of service level. So these are the KPIs that we talk about. As you see here, I already given some dials where I believe the market is at this point of time. But what we'll do is we'll step through component by component, trying to understand what is the gap, where is it, and where are we today. Well, as you see, I'm quite bullish around the maturity in terms of quality, in terms of coverage, maybe a little bit less on the sort of equivalence here. But one have to remember as well, there are different markets out there. I was on the previous session with Rakuten, and they speak highly about the greenfield markets. And of course, the greenfield markets have a different profile. The brownfield markets, they are probably more like this profile that we're looking at here. All right, so I start with the radio hardware. Note it's radio hardware. I will come back to the software portions later on. So radio hardware is absolutely essential, of course, to create this coverage. I do believe that the ecosystem has now reached maturity in this in terms of we're able to, on an existing grid, not densifying it, not doing anything with it, put a radio solution out there that matches this. So of course, there's a number of bands, there's a number of platforms that needs to be ready to do this, 2T2R, 4T2R, and so on. And everybody has their own needs, right? There seems to be very difficult to simplify the amount of kit that is needed out there. And it comes back to different things, where you are in the world, what the regulatory environment tells you to do, what spectrum assets that you have, if you're balanced or imbalanced. If I compare this with the incumbent ones, so on the platform side, I think we're quite close to where we need to be. Of course, incumbents today, they are still leading. This is a fast-following movement. It's not a leading movement at this point of time. So this is why we have this +1. On the energy consumption, which is the second most important thing here, we are on par. That we've seen. We've seen it in some of the benchmarks that the operators are doing with our kit versus traditional kit. Where it differs, and this is maybe the important piece of this, if you're looking for a difference here, it is on the portfolio side. So yes, while you find all these frequencies in there, you find all these platforms, you will not find the complete matrix of everything times everything that you would find in a traditional portfolio. However, it is not that important, I would claim. So once you have the platforms, we can easily sort of spin new radio products if there's serious volumes behind it in about 6 months' time. So it's not blocking in that way if there's a market for it. If we look at this software, and when I look at the software, I do not look at this as sort of CUD. I do look at this as CUDU-RU. And it comes back to how we judge this versus what is needed. And looking back to the previous session as well, he was talking about all the things that needed to be in a solution. And of course, there's a number of these RATs that needs to be supported, whether it's LTE, 5G, GSM, UMTS, NB-IoT, and they are in all essence, they are in different states in this. To find all of them in one place is today difficult. You will find some of them very easily. And I think the market early on geared towards this sort of overlay structure. Do 4G, do 5G, where it was easy to find the market, or easy to define something and adhere to the protocols that were out there as well. Whereas you would see GSM, UMTS, yes, there's a slight issue there, and it comes back to the investment in this. Also, the previous presenter talked a little bit about this. So with that investment, the 2G, 3G stacks that are out there, they are legacy stacks. You have them, and then you need to reuse them somehow, and they need to be adopted to do this, to do the Open RAN. Whereas the other stacks are getting new. So going back to this, do we actually need all this stuff then? I mean, you heard the previous presentation. Yes, at least for the brownfield, it is very, very difficult to put something like this in to a network if you don't have all of this. Does all the networks have all of this? Absolutely not. We've seen this across the world, and it depends on where you are. If you are in some very advanced operator in Europe, yes, it's probably full stack. If you go into some of the developing world, or if you go into tier 2, it's a subset of this. DU hardware then. So while this is probably not so important from the sort of 3 criteria I put up for measurements, whether it is the coverage or it's the service equivalence or the quality of service level equivalence. It is, though, something that is absolutely necessary to have out there in most of these networks. Yes, there are these models of centralizing the DU in a more rational way. But at the same time, when we look at this, it's also in the practical network something that actually sits at the cell site. Today, there's a small gap here, and the gap comes in energy consumption. It's maybe not so strange that that gap is there as we're using commercial processors, but that causes, from time to time, some issues around this, and this is how to put this kit into existing solutions, whether it's street furniture or cabinets and things like that. However, we have to remember that is a penalty we take for the last step there. We want the freedom. Open RAN is not Open RAN without the freedom of selecting software. All right, so I come to my last point around this, and this is about business model maturity. What we find out there is typically 2 categories of customers. One category is what I call this category 1, which is most of the customers. They do want Open RAN. They are interested in it. But what we find as well, their way of dealing with it is like dealing with all the RAN. So they expect one neck to choke. They don't want to run around and deal with this disaggregation thing. So yes, this creates business opportunities, but it also makes this quite stale. If we look at the sort of downside of this and what the challenge is you put someone in between, it becomes always some type of excess margin that needs to go into the system. It's very hard to get the SI to move kit through the books without adding some margin. So the question is this the right form? Did we really take advantage of all the disaggregation when we deal with it this way? The second one, what we find in some places, and these are isolated places, but they're still big enough ones to drive this. They're asking for homegrown solutions. They want to use things that are coming out of their own R&D as terms of software, and they're asking for radius to fit that solution. So here, of course, the problem is always this economy of scale. How can you make that work if everyone wants their own software, if everyone wants their own integration? All right, so what does this mean then? I think this is maybe one of the biggest challenges for the industry. If we can't figure out how to procure it in a way that takes advantage of the disaggregation, then are we back then to recreating a new set of SRAM vendors? Or is there a different way of doing this? We see also some of the ones that enter the market, say, from a traditional view and getting into this Open RAN. Some of that is lipstick solutions, what I would call them. They're not truly Open RAN. I cannot answer this. This is the operator that needs to tell me what they want to buy. But there is a risk here. With that, I stop.
Thank you very much, Jan. I think it is a great question. With everything, the business case needs to change a little bit in what's actually happening. So great insights in there. Let's have the panel. Jan, please take your seats. Next, I'm going to call up Eugene Jordan. Welcome, Eugene, from Parallel Wireless, and Patrick Lopez from NEC. So, welcome, you two. Would you like to introduce yourself, Eugene? I'm sure everyone knows you because you're infamous in the industry of Open RAN at this point in time. So, would you like to introduce yourself and then yourself, Patrick?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Eugene Jordan, VP of Marketing at Parallel Wireless. I started 21 years ago in the industry, and you all can say you don't look old enough to be working in the industry for 21 years. And I started in the industry after 9/11, and with 2 degrees, I was only able to get a job as a receptionist at a tiny little startup named Starent. And if you've been in the industry for as long as I've been, you know that Starent became the most successful startup. We went public, and then we got sold to Cisco. So, and I felt that there was another startup left in me. And that's why when I met Steve Papa, who is our CEO, I told him, I don't know what you're smoking. I don't know what you're drinking. But please, let me be part of it. And it was almost 9 years ago. And let me tell you guys, Open RAN is not for a faint of heart. This tough Russian lady, the first year it was so tough, she cried. I'm also a mom to a 17-year-old, so if you're dads or moms, you know how hard it is. And I also have 3 rescue dogs.
Brilliant, thank you. Patrick, beat that.
No, I concede. I can't really claim that many achievements. Well, my name is Patrick Lopez. I'm looking after product management for NEC for the 5G products, which are our radio, the work that we're doing with radio software partners that we have, the transport, the core network, and for those of you who know Netcracker is a subsidiary of NEC, so we're managing as well how orchestration and automation works across 5G. And I have 2 boys. And,
teenagers?
Yes.
God bless you.
Well, you know, although we're probably similar age, I look much older than you. And I've been involved in Open RAN for quite some time. I think there's a lot of familiar faces around the room. I think we've all have the scars of starting Open RAN from scratch when it was not called Open RAN, when it was just a concept, and when we first deployed that to connect the unconnected, and then now NEC has been able to show that Open RAN is mature and works. We are probably the only vendor that has massive MIMO Open RAN radios that are deployed at scale in dense urban environments. So for those of you who know Tokyo, you know that it's not the friendliest RF environment. It's pretty challenging. And that is deployed there, Open RAN. So, you know, we hear Open RAN skeptics every day. But I think that every day we push the limits a little further. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Jan, you've had a chance to introduce yourself before and get an understanding of Comba Telecom, so thank you very much for that. I think it's quite interesting about Open RAN adoption. This is going to be both success stories and also challenges. And I think let's be brave enough. We really want to hear about the success stories because that gives people hope. But we're all engineers at heart, and you can't learn without a couple of failures or a couple of challenges that you have to get over. So just starting, Jan, the conversation, what Open RAN solutions have proven to be a success for Comba Telecom?
It's a good question. I would put it to 2 parts. that has been successful investments for us, where we saw business coming out of it. One was early ability to do multi-rat. I think we've done that together with Parallel, for instance. It truly shows that with this multi-rat, you're able to address lots of market, right? So that's been very important. The second one, if I only get to choose two, right, would be...
choose as many as you
As
want.
many as you like, and the success stories. It's just we've got 19 minutes.
All right, okay. Now, this second one would be the investment in multi-band radios, right? And this is, again, it's a catch-up game, yes, but it is catching up with the best of the best, right? So those radios are top class, and that gave us a position at the table with Telefonica, right? That was very, very important to us. So with that, we will be moving that Telefonica program forward together with NEC and making sure that we can really demonstrate that Open RAN is as good as any traditional solution out there. So these are the two ones, I think, our bets that we've done during the past few years. These are the most important ones.
Yeah, and it was quite interesting there, because if I wind back the clock to probably the last time anyone was on a lectern, which could have been 2 years ago, everyone was like saying, Open RAN won't succeed because there wasn't a multi-band radio. And I don't want to just deploy 2G or just deploy 5G. I've got about 18 channels that I need to actually deploy at this point in time. So yeah. A challenge has gone into success, but what do you see the challenges today in Open RAN for Comba Telecom that you would like to highlight?
All right, so on the challenge side, if we look at this effort that needs to go into it, yes, we do radios, yes, we follow all the standards and so on, yet with every project, it does require some integration. Now, we have these integration aspects that we are doing together with each and every DU vendor on the market, but we do see that it takes quite a lot of effort. And it also takes two to tango, right? So it doesn't matter how advanced we are if there's not DU software following this. And the other way around as well, right? So in the traditional vendor, you would have this as a product planning unit inside your house. Here, we are then spread out over this, and these are, of course, it takes effort to do this. And it's, I wouldn't say it's not, it's trivial, but it's not only us and the DU vendor, it's the customers that also requires it. This whole puzzle game, it goes back and forth all the time. I can tell you, there's calls every week how to resolve all of these things and make sure that we can get solutions out to the customer.
So almost there's an inertia, almost like walking through mud, to try and actually show that you can actually deliver a product.
Get exactly. I mean, I alluded to it in the sort of context of it. Yes, in principle, all of this is there, right? So we got the platforms, we got to this and that. But then the customer said, well, I actually want this combination like this. Yes, it actually needs to be tested. One of the our new triple band radio, I was sitting the other day and said, right, what would it take us to test through every single RAT combination we have on that multi-band, multi-carrier radio? Well, there was about 1,500 combinations. And of course, nobody's going to test through 1,500. I've been with all the big threes in the past, right? They don't do it either. You make a list of 100 that you do in the lab, and then the rest of it come back to R&D and ask us, and we retest the stuff, right? So yes, there's a lot of integration effort. And part of it is falling on us, part of it is falling on our partners.
Thank you very much, Jan. Eugene, do you see similar challenges and similar success stories, or parallel wireless in different markets? Are there different stories to talk about?
So I think the stories are very similar, because when you're starting something from scratch and you want to disrupt the industry, it's never easy. So you need to build the ecosystem, and this is where all the partners come in on the radio side, because Parallel Wireless does software. So we need partners on the radio side. We need partners on the server side. We also need partners on the integration side. We need partners in the data center. So the challenge is, it takes what it takes. It takes time, it takes effort to bring the right ecosystem for each deployment. And it might be different in Africa, and it might be different in the US, because each operator has their own business case that they need to support and business model that we need to meet. So I think the biggest challenge is finding those right partners for each operator and to support their business case.
And do you see, because that's quite an interesting perspective, you're bringing a system integrator, a radio expert, you're bringing the platform, the compute platform together, and the software that you're actually defining. Do you find you mature at the same rate in actually providing the solution, or are the other partners also held back at some point in time? How does it feel? Is it like triplets all growing up at the same time? Or is it someone that is 16, someone that is 12, and someone that is 7?
So I'm going to use a different analogy. It's like we're all building a plane as we're flying it. So, and the pilot is the mobile, operator. So, and we're all making sure that the plane doesn't crash. So, and it's as you build one plane this way, then the next one is flying on its own. So we've been doing it since 2014-15. So we're past that stage, building the plane while we're flying it. And right now, it's just the challenge is finding the right partners, getting on the plane, and flying the plane to the destination.
Make sure it's a 747 with 4 engines and change one engine at a time if I'm a passenger. For sure. I think, does that bring a significant level of innovation? And we're going to talk about where the innovation is going to come from later on. But how do you find, because that really is the heart of an engineering process. Do you find it innovations coming out of the product work that you're actually doing at this point in time?
Absolutely. That's why mobile operators started looking into Open RAN. The initiative is operator driven. And with 3, like you were in your presentation, when the industry consolidates to 3 vendors, there's no innovation. So innovation in Open RAN is the main driver. Features, capabilities.
Yeah, and so we've got all the innovation, we've got some of the challenges and the maturity of where you're at. What would you like the operators to listen to you in the next sentence about what you would like to hear from them, or what you'd like to tell them and they'd like to hear and be able to react on, if it's one thing you could get them to do for parallel wireless?
So that's not how parallel wireless operates.
Okay.
Because we always listen to our customers, their needs, what they're trying to achieve, and then we get at the same table or the RAN site, and we try to innovate and collaborate. So it's a very collaborative process. We're not a vendor, we're a partner. And I think this is what's very important about Open RAN, that the ecosystem shifted, and it's very collaborative approach.
Brilliant, brilliant. Where Patrick, I'm now on the list. Now on Patrick. So NEC, to be honest, thank you for coming back into the market. You are leading, blazing the way of providing new RUs out there. And the evolution, how mature do you believe that radio unit is now? Where have you got to?
Well, we have several tens of thousands of sites deployed commercially with live traffic, with feature parity and better cost performance than traditional systems. I think with we've seen the waves, Open RAN, it's only for rural. Oh no, well actually it works in urban. Well, it doesn't scale. well, it actually scales, and it scales better than other systems. It's not really secure, like new interfaces. Well, it's software. It is as secure as 3GPP is secure, and as clouds are secure. Now, if you want to go to a system where you have appliances that are bolted to the floor with the physical access to that, well, you have one level of security. But the reality is that the large majority of networks are evolving towards being more cloud friendly. And, that doesn't bring new security risks. It just brings a different way to manage security by design. And from that perspective, you're not going to be able to convince me that, inherently a cloud system is less secure than an appliance, because the only difference is with Open RAN, well, you have more interface, so you have more attack surface. So there are more ways, or rather places where somebody could try to get in, but it's not more or less secure than any other cloud system and any other telecom system. So, like, Japan is fairly conservative, when you have an operator like NTT Docomo that is the main network operator in Japan that has like several tens of millions of subscribers, they don't play around with their networks, so it's a little probably insulting for them to hear that, maybe they're taking risks because they're not. They're fairly, serious about deploying new technologies. So I think at a high level, the only worry we have, generally speaking, is the rate of adoption, the rate of learning, And it's normal. You have new vendors, you have new environment, you have inherently a more complex system because, well, I think the large majority of operators, if they want to move to Open RAN, it's because they want true multi-vendor. They don't want lock-in. They want to be in a situation where they are in control. And that comes with, more management necessary. And we help them with that. So I think the adoption rate is fine. We see, so it's deployed at scale in Asia. Europe is seeing the first deployments. We see press releases quite often, and we'll see more this year. There'll be hundreds of sites, and next year there'll be thousands. In Latin America, there has been the first deployments there. There are a few hundred sites, and like the next generation is coming as well.
Yeah, we see the same thing. Yeah.
And North America, is working quietly, but we'll see them coming into the fray soon as well. So, we know all of us the pace of our industry. But I think that, if we look at the rate of penetration of Open RAN, it's been one of the fastest penetration of a new technology into our industry ever.
Yep.
Wow, brilliant. I just want to pick up one point that you actually mentioned, because when anyone says Open RAN in Japan, who do you think of? Rakuten.
Yeah.
But it's actually NTT Docomo.
Well,
When you look at it, I don't know the scale figures off the top of my head, but I know they've been doing it for like 4 years and have led all the specifications that have been actually coming through. So
Docomo was the first.
For the someone who's branded themselves out there, Rakuten as Open RAN, but it's NTT Docomo.
Docomo was the first, and then Rakuten was the first massive MIMO version of it, and now Rakuten is taking it everywhere they can, But yeah, it's important to mention that it's not an overnight success either, right? Like a lot of people have been working on Open RAN for a long time, and now it's coming to mainstream, and it's ready. And I think, at least on our side, for the amount of business that we've seen this week alone, I think operators are getting more and more ready as well for it.
And just giving a sense of idea, for those in the room that know architectures, and the disaggregation of effectively a base station into a radio unit and a DU and a CU, distributor unit and core unit or centralized? Central unit. Thank you. How many different DU/CU providers would NEC today be able to integrate to?
So there are public ones and there are not public ones.
Please, just the public ones.
well, the
because
public ones-
Otherwise, my antitrust lawyer will come and tackle me.
Not worry, we have ours too.
Yours will come on both sides.
So the public ones are, Rakuten / Symphony / Altiostar and Mavenir. And there are others, several others. I think at this stage we're probably the vendor that has integrated with the most CUDU vendors in the world.
Is it? I mean, I love the terminology plug and play, and I'm sure we all do. Is it really plug and play, or is it, obviously, is it still an engineering challenge to? I don't mean challenge in a negative word. I mean in anything that
It's
you pull
neither.
together.
It's neither. It's not yet like off the shelf. You take one vendor, you take another vendor, you put them together, and it works immediately. It is, from that perspective, it is from a functional standpoint. But then if you want to build like a high performance system in a multi-vendor environment, well, first, I mean, there's still the specs of O-RAN that are evolving at the interface level. And then there's still like some work that is necessary. So that's why a lot of operators not only select NEC as a product vendor, but also as an SI, because well, there's a need for SI, particularly in the Open RAN, to put it together, at least for a period of time. And then, well, probably the maturity of the market will lead to actually have more plug-and-play deployment, but still not 100% there in plug-and-play.
Great, thanks. And Jan, finally to you, before I just ask a general question of all the panel. What action do you feel the industry needs to take to accelerate the integration of Open RAN into brownfield networks?
This is a tricky question, but there are two things. I think Patrick alluded to it. I think it's well known. The industry has very long cycles. So you run an RFP, and then you sort of deploy it for the next 3 to 5 years, and you run another one. Of course, with Open RAN, we'd like to see some of those opportunities come a little bit quicker, right? Yeah. Because we do need to start making some business in some of these areas. So it's that decisive investment that is needed around it. There was another point where I sort of forgot while I was talking here. A little bit around what I said, this feature parity or things like that. I took it from a different perspective, right? I talked about that you have the same use services, I talked about the same coverage, and I talked about the sort of same KPIs. I wouldn't say lower the bar, but Open RAN is done slightly differently. Should it actually be measured exactly the same way? That is a question, right? So I think it makes it overly complicated sometimes, where we get these enormous RFPs, and I've seen them before, when I was with other vendors, and yes, it takes forever to answer every single question in there. Yes, there's a lot of engineers sort of protecting the reputation inside the company that they know what they're doing, but is it really all of these things necessary? Sometimes I sort of doubt it. Again, I'm not looking for lowering the bar. I'm looking for, is there a simpler way that we do the business here, not having to do this enormously complicated RFP processes?
Well, thankfully it has moved on a little bit, because I remember writing tender specifications where you went down to each of the it wasn't 3GPP, it was XCGSM at that stage, and wrote down all the TS sections that you wanted compliance to, and you'd come up with about 500 pages of compliance. Are they still doing that?
It's still 500, or not pages, but it's about 500 technical questions each and every time you have to go through, right? Cool, it is what it is, right? We comply with it, it's fine, but if it could be sort of reduced a little bit, get faster to business, we would be very happy. And a little bit of what I was asking for before, right? A little bit of change of behavior from the MNO side. You're not dealing with a 100 billion company any longer. These are, while very big, sort of a little bit smaller size, right? So have a little bit of managing that expectation around how you do business with them. It is different. And we'd like to leverage the difference that we have and can offer in terms of swiftness to market with new things, ability to do things very quickly in innovative parts of the network, where Open RAN definitely have an advantage.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We are finishing with 4 seconds to go. So thank you, Jan, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Eugenia, for your commentary. Give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.